Hey gang, let's talk about hills. So hills are kind of a ubiquitous training or strengthening conditioning exercise in the horse world. We hear people talk about them a lot. We sometimes get prescribed them by our vets. But like anything, if we don't use them the right way, then we don't accomplish what we're after. So in this short video, I'm just going to give you some insights on how to think about hills and approach hills. And if you don't live in an area where you have access to hills, this information is still going to be really valuable for you. If you have questions, drop them in the comments section below. And if this video is helpful to you, click that thumbs up button so I'll know to create more content like this. So if your vet has told you to use hills or your trainer has told you to use hills, because let's say your horse has been lame or they have a sticky stifle or they have some sort of gait abnormality, and there's the idea that the gymnastic effect of hill work will help them. You want to get really clear on what you are trying to use your inclines for. I like to break this into three categories. So first, you can use slope terrain as what I call movement therapy, or basically this would be used in like a rehab setting. A lot of it would be done from the ground and or riding if that's appropriate for the horse. But this is work that's done on very, very mild slopes. We're not talking about big killer steep inclines here. And this is simply to provide a stimulus where the body needs to organize itself. And that's why I consider this more in the therapeutic realm. This is going to dictate your prescriptions, like how many reps you do, like what kinds of activities you're doing on the hillside. So if it has been recommended that you do hills, like from your vet or your trainer, you want to get clear on, are we using this in a therapeutic sense, or the next category would be in a gymnastic strengthening way. This is what most riders on a moderately fit horse are seeking. They're adding an extra layer of strength, or they're just trying to introduce some cross training. So you can use slopes to add gymnastic strength, but your approach would be different, like the type of incline that you're using, the activities that you're doing on the hill, and or the speed that you're using is going to differ between a therapy approach versus adding gymnastic strength. The last category I like to think about is what I call sport specific training. And that is for, I also call it like sharpening the spear, right? That is where you're in a discipline that either relies on being adept at hill climbing. So 3-day eventers, combined driving event, competitors, jumping to some extent, endurance riding. So in these worlds, you're not only going to need to go uphill in your everyday life, but the fitness gains you get from climbing steep inclines, duration over inclines, that all starts to be very specific for what you're doing. And again, that is a very different approach than the average rider or somebody just looking to add gymnastic strength. So let's define these different slopes because that matters. And I find that a lot of times this is lacking when a trainer or a vet tells somebody to go ride or lunge or work their horse on hills. They don't specify what kind of hill. And we humans, we're doers. We're overdoers sometimes, and we tend to think that steeper is better. And for the general improvement of mechanics, that is not the case. Generally, a mild slope is better. So let's define these a bit. A mild slope or gentle slope, most people have this in their driveway or a paddock, out in the pasture somewhere, maybe a little swale, maybe you have a berm somewhere. This is, if you think about an area that rises 6 to 8 vertical feet over a horizontal distance of 100 feet. So really mild, you're gaining 6 to 8 feet over 100-foot distance. I'm so sorry for you international folks. I am giving this in feet rather than metric system. I'll try to translate that below or in my next video. So this would be mainly what you would want to use for therapeutic settings. I've got this horse here on a mild slope, and this does happen to be one of my paddocks. That's the great thing about understanding how and why you're using hills is a lot of times you can just use what you have. You don't need access to the best terrain, chances are you have even a small area that might have a gentle incline. This is a young horse recovering from quite a significant colic surgery, starting on some gentle slopes, in handwork on gentle slopes. So again, the prescriptions that we would use for this horse would be staying very clearly in that therapeutic realm. Other activities that would fall, for this particular horse or other horses, like I said, in the kind of a rehab or in the early phases of conditioning, if a horse is totally out of shape and you're in that therapeutic realm, you could use the side of a hill to work through different patterns, either online or riding. I call this like a hillside freestyle in this diagram, but basically riding various figures around your hillside, maybe circling around a tree and then riding diagonally across the slope, and just giving the horse's body lots of different stimulus and need to adjust his posture and adapt to the terrain. This is super low impact. It's generally done at very slow speeds. And like I say, the duration of time that you would be out there is dictated by, it's very horse dependent on where your horse is in its journey. Moving along, a moderate slope is a hill or a slope terrain that gains 8 to 10 feet over that 100-foot distance. So slightly steeper than what we were just talking about. Again, not crazy steep, not the kind of steep where if you were walking up that hill on your own, hiking, you'd be gasping for air and leaning over and putting your hands on your knees. Not that steep. We're still not quite that steep. Arguably, a moderate slope terrain is where you're going to get your most conditioning benefits, both from cardio respiratory gains and strength gains. If you have access to a moderate slope, you're golden. Like I say, unless you're in that therapy realm, but really you don't have to have access to steep terrain. Most people don't need it unless, like I say, you're in a very specific sport that you are conditioning specifically for. This is a moderate slope. Again, I'm just out in one of our paddocks because it's pretty flat on the property I own. There are hills around us, but the actual property is pretty flat. So I wander up and down my paddocks. This is a moderate slope. I'm doing what I call a 45-20 here, 45 seconds uphill and an extended walk, turn around, do a collected walk down the slope for 20 seconds. I have a video of that on the YouTube channel, that particular exercise. This would be to add gymnastic strength. And I would try to do it, at least once a week during the dry season when it's not rainy and boggy out here. Moving on to that really final tier, that steep slope. And again, if you don't have access to this, don't panic. You don't need it. There are so many activities and strengthening exercises you can do on mild and or moderate slopes. And again, I really just want you to get clear on what you have access to, what you think you're being prescribed by your vet or your trainer. Give them these diagrams, maybe ask them to help define what they mean by a slope for you. A steep slope is that terrain where if you walked up it yourself, you are going to be working, you're going to feel your thigh muscles, you're going to have to shorten up your step and work a little bit harder. You're going to be breathing heavy yourself. This terrain gains 15 to 20 feet over that 100-foot distance. So it's quite a pitch. And it may be long, it may be a short, steep hill. Again, you don't really need access to this terrain unless you are training for something very specifically, that would benefit from the cardio effects of the steep slope and or prolonged effort of steep slope. So again, endurance sports, 3-day eventers, those sorts of activities. So that brings us to the end of our presentation here. But again, if you have questions, drop them below. I just want to encourage you all to be really clear on how you're using hills and why, because that's going to dictate your prescription, the activities, the speed, and the reps of what you're doing on those hills. Thanks for tuning in. Click the like button and the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in a future video.